Welcome to the InterPlay podcast. I am your host today, Christine Gautreaux, the InterPlay Integrity and Innovation Director, and I am delighted to be having this conversation today with our guest. And today we're going to be talking about the art of ensoulment and interplaying with the Hidden Monastery and so many other things. So today our guest is Cynthia-Winton Henry. She is the co-founder with Porter of InterPlay since 1989. And she is also a collaborator with our dear friend and colleague, Shoinka Rahim, on changing the race dance. She's currently focused on body wisdom of the soul, developing practices using the art of ensoulment, which is a playbook on how to create from body and soul. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that and put the link to that in the show notes. She also coordinates the dance chapels in the Hidden Monastery, and her writing can be found at the Dancing Center on Substack. It's so hard to encapsulate this amazing creative artist and colleague of ours into one paragraph, but we did our best. So let's welcome to the stage Cynthia-Winton Henry.
Hi. Thank you, Christine.
Welcome. Thank you for being here. How about we start out with some I Could Talk Abouts, just to get ourselves warmed up.
Yeah, well, I could talk about the fact that I'm getting on a plane on Sunday and going a very long way to find my way in Patmos, Greece, with the luminaries, Krista Tippett and Padraig Otuama, to ask, how do we approach change in the world now?
What? Wow. I could talk about in about a week getting on a plane to go to the Pacific Northwest to gather with InterPlay leaders from around the country and around the world for our annual InterPlay Leaders Gathering.
So cool. I could talk about being I live in co-housing in Fair Oaks, and watching my husband, who's 75, and my granddaughter, who's 5, join hands and jump in the pool together yesterday.
Oh my goodness. I could talk about how excited my dog Monty was when I finally came home. I had been gone for about a month doing caregiving and transitioning my dad into another realm, and how I think the dog thought I wasn't ever coming home.
Monty. I could talk about dreaming and listening with people. I companion probably about 20 people a month, listening in for our body wisdom and this body wisdom of soul, which is this deep, what my friend David McCauley calls the you of you. And the challenge of and the beauty of orienting to that as a physical practice.
I could talk about this weekend creating space between the solstice and the strawberry full moon and my birthday, like creating some deep sacred space for myself to interplay with myself.
Right. Reminds me, I just had a birthday, and I called the Wing It Performance Ensemble members, those that could get to me, together about 15 of us. These folks are really the laboratory for InterPlay as both a performance art and a community practice. And such a joy to be with them.
Right? Well, that makes me think about I could talk about in November in Atlanta, we're hosting a performance intensive, a nation international wide performance intensive here in Atlanta because we don't want to lose that magic of the laboratory of creating from our whole beings.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. That's exciting,
Right?
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 Yep.
I'm going to invite us to take a deep breath. Whew. I have so many things I want to ask you. I'm like, oh, I have Cynthia-Winton Henry here for 30 minutes. What are we going to start with? But I think I kind of want to open it up to you and what you've been playing with lately. And what is really like you have been a leader in the embodiment field for 35 years. And what's currently bubbling up for you?
Before InterPlay, the primary question for both me and Phil was body and soul. We were in Body and Soul Dance Company, and we already kind of knew that when we were dancing and creating together, something powerful and transcendent was at play. And we were interested in telling stories about that and creating around that. But the community, the world was just not even able to be on the page of embodiment in the 80s. And not to mention Phil's gay. And so we were right in the middle of the AIDS crisis. And our first performance with it was called God, Sex, and Power. So the God word, whatever godness is, I'm not laying hold to that in any particular way. But it was like it's always been a very present thing. So the development of interplay, and then I think people's connection to the deep wisdom and what happens without giving it language. Yes. And then all this development around our understanding about race and how do we find resilience and how do we find our way and what is home and what is true inclusion. And, we can see it now. The religious field is fraught and the political field is fraught. And my call to, really, as a white person from a Protestant lineage, to really not borrow, to really deeply listen to my go to myself, go to listening and playing. That just my question about soul and ensoulment has just been there and became kind of part of my career path. Really, um, ensoulment seems like a sister to embodiment. And
I
so
love that.
it's for
Ensoulment is
me,
a sister to embodiment.
yeah,
Mm,
or maybe it's the bigger bowl,
mhm.
of embodiment. Like to drop into all the way into the body, then the more subtle experience of the organizing energy systems that are within us and that are connecting us energetically that a lot of healers look at and artists look at. That is a real thing, and whole religions are based on it, and but how do we talk about it and how do we play with it without being in a religious conversation? So one day I asked Andrew Harvey, if anybody knows Andrew Harvey, I got 15 minutes with him. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about this idea of ensoulment. And, I just sort of got this kind of blessing out of the universe from one of the luminaries, yep, that's a good thing. Do that. And so, a slow process of developing my own wisdom, and listening to others, bringing that slowly into some order and way to play, and now a playbook.
Right? You, for folks that may be meeting you for the first time or have played with you for years but don't know, Cynthia, you are an incredible writer and a prolific writer. How many books do you have out there now?
I have written 4 books, and I
Mhm.
started with an early, memoir, trying to understand what the heck had happened or to me and who I am, as writing is one of those helpful ways, as is visual art. You need to get something outside of you, as at least I do, and so, okay. And then I wrote by invitation, well, with some support from a publisher, What the Body Wants, which is really the whole creative process around InterPlay. And I wrote Dance the Sacred Art, which is about really using this core of dancing in our spiritual practice and the joy of awakening, that in ourselves. And then this last one, which is self-published, The Art of Ensoulment. Yeah.
Which is a beautiful book, by the way. I've
Thank
gotten
you.
my copy and it's beautiful. And I know Marla Durden helped shepherd that in for you.
Oh,
And
totally.
just highly recommend, y'all. And we'll put the link in the show notes so folks can find out more about that. And lately you've been writing on Substack on the regular, which has been delightful.
Thank you.
How has that been for you?
Well, I think writing for me is, I think of what I'm doing as a conversation. The word conversation means to dance with,
Mm.
right? So
Say
here
that
we are.
again.
Here
Say
we are.
that again for the people in the back. The word conversation means to dance with.
Right? I learned that
Right?
from a conversational special expert, and that's what he said. And he loved interplay.
Mm.
I, and it's like, oh my gosh. So conversing, just as the word entertainment means to hold between, when you look at the root of the etymology, these are not kind of private or sectored ways of being. So yeah, I love being, I wish I had more conversation through my writing, but at least I'm conversing from what I know and finding some connection there. And it helps me think. It helps me order the complexities of my experience. And I I have to work pretty hard at the editing process because the way that I think is moving in a different way than the written word. So I do a lot of online writing and fixing, writing and fixing, writing and fixing.
I'm the same way. The only
Yes.
way I don't do that is when I'm doing poetry, right? And
Yeah.
even as we're having this conversation, what bubbles up for me is, for years I couldn't understand how people could just drop down and meditate, right? Because my brain doesn't work that way. My brain's like, "Choo, choo, 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 choo," and I'm doing and going. And interplay was one of those tools I found that if I interplay and then I drop into my body, then I can do more poetry, do
Mhm.
more writing, do more meditating. Um, how is it for you in relation to your embodiment practices and then things like writing? Or how does that work for you?
Well, I guess for me, I'm at a stage in my life where I don't think of one thing as embodied and another as not. Right? So for me, words are dancers. I like the quiet slow of dance and even cognition, bringing that into form. I love that. I love that dance. I think of all of it as a dance, and that's kind of what I mean by the dancing center. Like the dance is in all of it. The dynamic physicality is flowing through all the forms. And so, yeah, moving and playing between them, whether I'm competent or incompetent, not. I'm not generally over worried about being super competent. There's people, always a million people who are so much more gifted and yeah, beautiful. Uh, and so, just like, oh, this is what I do I am because I need to, right? And it's also fun, for me. So, yeah.
Well, and you have been a trendsetter or on that leading edge of tapping into our bodies and the work. I know the last couple of years you've had some workout around sensitive bodies. And if you could speak a little to that, because I know personally that resonated really strongly with me. And I don't hold those statistics in my head. And if I'm putting you on the spot, because I didn't
Not at
pre-ask you that
all.
question,
Thank you.
okay? Yeah.
Thank you for asking for that. If I have a niche, that's probably where it is. You know, uh, it's the statistics are from the research that 1/5 of humans across genders And 1/5 of species are more sensitive. So there's highly sensitive, that 1/5, but then there's the 70% of us that are sensitive. 70% of us.
That's
That
a
means like a
lot.
third, like maybe a third of us are not so sensitive. And one can easily come to the conclusion that this is an earth designed reality, that high sensitivity is a way that earth uh, functions for balance and to help the rest of the species be aware on a variety of levels where people might not be paying attention that much because of their householding or their child raising or their, whatever. So it's not something to be feel kind of good or bad about. Although, if you are highly sensitive, I've found it's like I have to do a lot of manual
Mm.
practices. I have to have practices. I have to put things in gear sometimes manually, meaning I have to have, like an artist, I have to turn it on. I have to figure out how to turn something on or to bring myself into balance. That then helps 70% of the species. And sometimes the 30% that are not so sensitive, boom, they get a wake up because they become ill or they have an accident or something happens. And even that 30% needs those tools. A lot of times that just having those tools makes you a better the tools that sensitives use, meditation, understanding about energy, how do you how do you do discernment when there's a flood in your system
Right?
a lot of the time. Yeah, our systems are, it's like high sensitivity for me is that I feel, sense, think, notice more
Mhm.
high at a high and a high frequency, and that means that a lot is my body's doing a lot of the time.
When you talk about this, and I've been in some of your classes with you around this, what always bubbles up for me is about how the artists are change makers.
Hmm.
And how, artists have always tended to be stereotyped in a certain way, but really they're the highly sensitive people who are receiving all this info and trying to make sense of it, right? And I think about your work with your shrine work. Will you tell folks a little bit about that? Because that is powerful work, that I've been gifted with, and so many people in our community have been gifted with.
Yeah, I'd love to share about that, but I think I want to just acknowledge that while it seems like it's the artists, and for sure that is, I want to just recognize our indigenous people and
Absolutely.
cultures that are already they're founded,
Hmm.
their genetic wisdom is in this place designed because you have to have high sensitivity to survive.
Right.
So our BIPOC folks, a lot of any group that's under duress, often will move. Your systems are turned on high, so
Hmm.
you get high sensitivity, and so people who are organizing, whether it's in duress or whether it's from the ground of like just needing to take care of ourselves, they develop these, you know, phew, incredible systems of understanding through plants and earth and all, and the speaking of everything to everything. And so I think it's very potentially, when we center that, a whole culture phenomenology, and that artists today are seen as some of the ones, that are highlighting that. But I really think it's deeper than some kind of art, right?
Hmm.
I know you know exactly what
Thank
I.
you for naming that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like I want to always just be in that presence of that
Hmm.
and ancestry
Hmm.
of human wisdom, and my own guides, occasionally help me in that regard. The shrine work, and artwork. I mean, I just love. again, I think I love playing around. Mess. I have a poem called "Mess Around," and yeah, it's like so. I found myself like kind of in a stream with a lot of stuff coming through a recycling system, and I was in this art studio. It's called Redux, and all of a sudden, I got this tiny little studio, and then next thing I knew, there were things coming through, and I just found myself collaging all this material and building these things. And next thing I knew, that a lot of it I realized were like these little odd shrines. They're quirky and funny and poignant, and they were coming out of the material, out of the refuse, right? And lots of artists do this kind of thing, and I found myself joining them. But a lot of people like, well, I'm just basically a glue artist is what I call it. I'm not doing that so much at the moment. I'm currently focused on something that's much scarier and harder for me, which is learning to paint
Okay.
and draw figures, and a little bit more of a precise and kind of high, like has talk about one of those things like, oh, there's really good art everywhere. It's like, so it's very humbling, and but yeah, it's interesting to go in that
Right.
direction.
I love hearing what you're up to, because has it been 2 years or 3 years now that you step back from the day-to-day leadership of InterPlay?
Yeah, couple 2-3 years.
Right?
I
Somewhere
don't
around there.
really do years, so
It's been a minute. It's been a
yeah,
minute.
it has been.
So, what are you playing with these days? Because I know you are still doing InterPlay and you're doing the Hidden Monasteries. And tell us a little bit about what's up for you and what courses you're offering.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I wanna do a shout out. When I moved out of my position as sort of in a directing or consulting way for InterPlay, I was so excited that we put in place the InterPlay and education monies. The community gathered that. Like, one of my passions and curiosities has been, how can we move InterPlay into educational settings? Because we know that if people aren't learning about their creative birthrights at all the way through, they're missing a huge chunk of how our systems want to be designed and developed, and more inclusive, really. Um, so now there's an InterPlay Education week coming up, and Jory and Diane have been at that, and there's, so I helped a little bit to get it here at this point, as well as many other people, and I just want to say yes for that.
Yeah, that inaugural retreat is coming up in August, end
I
of
know.
July, 1st of August. And that was years in the making.
Yes, and I'm just passionate about pedagogy, which is a fancy word for how do we learn together? And without I'm just passionate about it, because I think a lot of the problems we're having systemically cannot be addressed with thinking alone, and the way that we're thinking and articulating, and that some of the big troubles that we're in have to do with the bringing our imagination all through our whole system and with each other and playing. So
Right?
that's a big one for me. I'm so excited. I'm so proud of InterPlay. And
Right. And how exciting is that, that if it spreads out through the education system, that our teachers, our children, our youth are can start from that sensitive, like
yeah,
from that place, and that, yeah, the word sensitive wanted to come out because I was thinking about all those sensitive beings and kids that are in a school system. I was one of them that don't quite fit. And if
right.
we had InterPlay infused in that,
Yeah. And the
how
body
beautiful.
wisdom of it, because
Hmm.
InterPlay is both a toolkit for creating together, but it's also a way of thinking
Mm,
about our experience. So, it's very practical, and it gives people a way to think about and access their inner authority, and move towards their health. So
right.
it's so exciting, and I'm very hopeful about just the ways that InterPlay is continuing to. learn about who it is now and
Right.
expanding. And I'm working there's a book called Hagitude written by Sharon Blackie. She's a UK Jungian psychologist and a mythologist. She's written a beautiful book on reimagining the second half of life for eldering and women, and being now 69, and well into this process of aging. I really need a way of playing with this that isn't just kind of like, oh, well, you're now retired, going to go on a long trip. There's so identity, physicality, shifts, fundamental shifts are happening. So I'm gathering a group that's starting tonight on the solstice, and just to play with the themes from the book. And so that's really, really fun, exciting for me. And I teach a couple of times a year. The Art of Ensoulment is kind of broken down into two components. One is the 4 core play areas that I think really help people feel ensouled. And that happens in the winter. And it also happens through people who are now Art of Ensoulment coaches, people who've been following this and can offer this themselves. In the fall, I teach these strategies, these creative strategies for the efficiency of energy, like how do we navigate our energetic fullness and experience, clarity of vision when there's so much complexity, and courage to love when we know we're loving, but we don't feel that way. And we get hurt and shunned, and, we're navigating nightmares. So these are really practical body wisdoms that have developed, that I've taught through time, but now they're coalesced here in this 9-week, I think it's an 8 or 9 week weekly class on Zoom. So that's
I love
exciting.
that.
I really love teaching
How
that.
do people find you or sign up? Like, where do you direct people?
Well, the main place to go is to Cynthia-WintonHenry.com.
There you go.
That'll lead you right to the Hidden Monastery website. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and if you're one of those people, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, friend me. Yeah, if you'd like to know more, or kind of get yourself moving towards a regular practice where dancing is your way of prayer and you don't have a place or community, there's 4 dance chapels every week that are led by me, by Ruth Showalter, Marla Durden, and Nancy and Jane lead on Thursdays. And we also have one that's happening in India as well. And there's also room for more of those to be led. But they're small pods of people who just hold this regular practice chapels. And they're simple. One of our main forms is to dance on behalf of one another and whatever is happening.
Right. So grateful for that form. This just bubbled up, and you may not know the answer because it's been 35 years, but that dance on behalf of form, like, where was the origin of that? Was
Yeah.
that from the performance troupe? Was it you? Was it Phil? Where did that come from?
I invited Neela Hayes, who's one of the early people in Authentic Movement, to come to a class I was teaching at Pacific School of Religion, a seminary in Berkeley. And I wanted to have her introduce her form to the seminarians. And in the process, I recognized my own experience about witnessing and being beheld and what could happen. And so dancing on behalf of, which is what, like now it's like a name, right? But it's really a process of how do we bring a request and have somebody enter into and play with and animate the request in a beautiful way, and just to have for a moment somebody else dancing on behalf of something I'm struggling with or something the world is struggling with, and to see if I can let go of that, holding it myself for a little minute. That's
Such a powerful tool.
yeah. So yeah, came through teaching teaching in a seminary.
I love that. Well, I want to tell you your legacy lives on, as you know, with we have InterPlay now in 7 different
Places.
countries, like almost all the states. But in our staff meeting today, we did a dance on behalf of one of our staff members who was just feeling overwhelmed, and just the power of us dancing on their behalf, so they knew they weren't alone,
Yeah.
right? We can't always do each other's jobs for each other, but we don't have to be alone or feel alone. And that's the power, to me, that's the power of that form
Yes, that's a
specifically,
big one.
is just that connection, body to body, even on the screen, which you were one of the pioneers of saying, hey, we're going to do this online. And I know that was not an easy thing to do in our community. But I'm so grateful that you did, and that we just keep spreading and going. And, we danced through the pandemic, a worldwide pandemic. And I don't know about you, but I played with people from all over the world
Right?
and met people I would have never had a chance to meet otherwise, but still using the forms of InterPlay and the tools of InterPlay to help deepen that connection, which was, I just can't thank you and Phil enough for
Mm.
this system, and for your vision, and for, it's such a gift to us.
Yeah.
It really is. And I know it
Well,
wasn't always easy.
I can't thank Phil Porter enough. This relationship of that is greater, greater than one can imagine. The power. I mean, in the mystery of it, really. Wow. So much. None of this would have happened. None of it without his brilliant artistry and expertise, and his mindfulness. Oh my gosh, one of the most mindful people I know. I love Phil
Right?
Porter. I'm honored to be in relationship with him now, and I hope forever.
Right? And as we call him in InterPlay, the man upstairs.
Well, you have to be in the InterPlace building to get
To
that.
get that joke.
He's in his studio and he's right up there. Otherwise, we don't want to call him that because
Right, and it could be
that's the wrong
tricky,
way.
right? Yes.
And we don't want to send him there too soon either.
Right? Absolutely. Well, Cynthia, we usually wrap the podcast with this question for all our guests. And it is, what role do your personal embodiment practices play in creating a sense of belonging?
Mm. I remember when the 7 practices of InterPlay were being cultivated and shared, uh, with actually some anxiety on Phil's and my part. Randy Newswinger said, "No, there's 8." And what's the 8th one, Randy? And he said, affirmation, affirmation, affirmation. And the practice of, I mean, something we were already doing. It wasn't like a news, it wasn't an add on. He named something that's really important and comes at the end of all of this, which is the ability to be moved by people. And to say, oh wow, that's really moving. That's wonderful. It's tricky because you can kind of become, we interplayers can kind of become showboats of affirmation, the most affirming people in the world. But even the quietness of it, or recognizing people simply and quickly, is one of the huge. That's huge. And then play creates affection, and affection is one of the great social change body tools. Affection, and it's affectionate in your way. Or for me, I was lucky to have a father that was very affectionate with me, and strong, but affectionate, and so like came naturally to me. And I think the seeds of affection and have infiltrated InterPlay for sure. Like there's permission around that. So those things create belonging. For me in my personal life, I'm in co-housing, which means there's 30 households. It's like an HOA, a homeowners association. So we have very clear nonprofit guidelines, but about 30 households have to gather regularly to talk about, what color are we going to paint and that can go on and on. So the practice of affirming, of taking things lightly, not over focusing, of looking for the good, of just befriending, feeling friendly to things, and affection for people beyond their and my behavioral shortcomings. Keep going and playing. Oh my goodness. I know people tell me in my co-housing that, I'll say this humbly, that, they're glad I'm there.
Mhm.
And of course, there's a lot of creativity to be shared and cultivated. So,
But I will, and I say this often, because I do a lot of speaking and facilitating out in the world, and I did that before I found InterPlay. But when I found InterPlay and these tools and this system, it changed my world, and it also just made me better at
mhm,
what I did because I accessed more of my whole body. And so I always say I will put an InterPlay facilitator or leader up against any other facilitator. So I know how lucky your co-housing is to have you. Even if you're not officially doing InterPlay,
mhm,
it's a body-wise
definitely.
thing that gets and lives in your body, and it, you know, changes you for the good. That's right.
Yeah. And
Oh,
I'm lucky as a founder of this, that I just get to hear all the time how profoundly this community, this practice, this way has, I mean, people do say it has saved their lives. It's a
why do
remarkable.
you think that is, Cynthia?
Why does it save their lives?
Yeah.
Um, well, we know that we live in times that are really can be excruciating in terms of loneliness.
Mhm.
Many of us have been shunned. So depression is, and sensitives are prone to depression because we're over, our systems are overworked.
Mhm.
So serotonin is hard to get, right? So rest is important. It's like, if there's just so much, yeah, there's so much mental health challenge for all people, and that's a mental health is physical health, and interplay follows the guidance of you know what health is offered, and all of the wisdom, as you know, Christine, around brains and art, and from the modern perspective all the way back to the indigenous perspective, bringing people right back to this embrace of who we each are, very specifically. That's health.
Yeah.
And if we don't have
Right?
it, we could die.
Right? I also love, like, you and Phil started this 35 years ago. We're celebrating the 35th anniversary this year. We're going to kick off a big birthday party at the leaders gathering. And I love that science is catching up to y'all. Things y'all have known, things you've been playing with and practicing for years. All of a sudden, I'm just seeing these studies coming out of Stanford, these studies coming out, people saying yes, right? And now we have data to back it up. Um, which we didn't need it because we've been doing it and being like, woohoo. But I know there's some people that do need that. And so I'll tag that in the show notes too. You, I think, were the one that introduced me to it. Andrew Huberman's podcast lab out of Stanford, his The Power of Play and all of that
Mhm,
studies that are coming out. It's
mhm.
just, I can totally nerd out about that, and it's way too heady, but I don't know, there's something that just feels exciting about this time,
Yeah,
about people being open to these conversations around using our whole body, using the whole soul, using all of ourselves, right?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you so much for your work in the world. I know you're quote unquote retired. You are out there still changing the world and making a difference. And just so grateful to be in community and connection with you. And – yeah. Is there
Thank you.
any last words you want to say to folks?
Oh, in my recent Substack, I love these words that came through. Celebrity is rare, genius is everywhere.
Mm.
Yeah, keep connecting to, our genius, the human genius, like in these desperate times. Staying close to the body, stay close to the earth, stay close to yourself, find other people who are doing it. That's where the genius is. Stay close. These systems, they do what they do. We might be able to take them down or move them or dismantle them, but the interplay thing started because we recognized these systems were going to be hard on us to play in.
Mhm.
And so we decided to have a little system of our own.
Mm.
So
Mm.
here we are, a bunch of hidden genius.
Right? Right?
And genius means muse, it means
Hmm.
your guardian, it means that support from your spirit team, from your ancestors.
Great words to go out on. Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Thanks,
Enjoy your
Chris.
trip. We look
Oh,
forward to reading about it on Substack because I know something yummy is going to come out of it, and we can't wait.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine, for all you're creating and all the beauty flowing.
Thank you.
And yeah, my blessings.
Appreciate it.